He remembered the first time he saw her. It was a quiet afternoon, sunlight falling softly through the windows of a small music studio. The smell of old wooden floors and dust from forgotten instruments filled the air. She was sitting at a piano that looked too big for the room, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys. The sound was soft at first, almost a whisper, and yet it caught his attention immediately. He had been walking past, thinking of nothing in particular, but the music pulled him in as if it had a life of its own. He paused at the door and watched her play, amazed by how her hands seemed to float over the piano. She didn't notice him at first, completely absorbed in her world. And then she looked up, and their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. They started meeting in that studio. Sometimes she played while he listened. Sometimes they laughed about notes they couldn't get right. Sometimes they just sat in silence, letting the music fill the spaces between them. It wasn't long before he realized he had fallen for her, that kind of crush that fades with time. But a deep, quiet feeling that made ordinary days brighter and ordinary tasks feel lighter. He didn't rush to tell her. He wasn't sure she felt the same, but he didn't need words every time. There was a comfort in simply being near her. Weeks turned into months. They shared more than music. They shared stories from childhood, favorite foods, dreams that felt too big to speak out loud, and fears that they didn't want anyone else to hear. He learned that she had lost someone close once, someone who had meant the world to her, and he listened without interruption. Offering only a hand on her shoulder or a quiet presence, she learned that he had his own scars, invisible lines, etched deep from moments he didn't talk about. There was trust between them, built slowly like the layers of a song that starts softly and then grows. They had routines, small gestures that made life easier. He would bring coffee before their sessions. She would always hum the tune she was learning when she thought no one was listening. Life felt full, even when it wasn't easy. Then one day, everything changed. He couldn't explain it at first. She was gone. Not a note of warning, not a hint in her voice, not even a message. She didn't show up at the studio. She didn't answer her phone. He thought maybe she was busy, maybe something urgent had come up. But days passed and then weeks, and still there was nothing. His heart felt hollow, as if the music itself had been stolen from the world. He called friends who might know. He checked places she frequented. He waited by the studio door like a fool, hoping she would appear, but she didn't. He replayed every moment in his mind, wondering if he had missed signs. Had he said something wrong? Had he been too quiet, too loud, too much, or not enough? He couldn't find answers, only silence. Every corner of his life seemed to echo with her absence. The studio felt emptier than before, the piano keys colder. He tried to play, but the music wouldn't come. Every note reminded him of what he had lost. Every melody seemed hollow. Friends told him to move on, to forget, to focus on the present. He tried, but forgetting wasn't possible. It was as if part of him had left with her. He began walking through the city streets aimlessly, searching for distractions that could fill the void. Cafes, parks, and quiet streets all felt smaller, less alive. He noticed couples laughing, friends sharing stories, and musicians playing on street corners. The music on the streets didn't touch him the same way anymore. He realized that he didn't just miss her. He missed the connection, the way her presence made ordinary sounds beautiful. People would say things like, "Time heals everything," but he felt time only stretched the ache, turning it into a dull companion that followed him everywhere. Then came nights when he would wake up suddenly, haunted by fragments of melodies they had played together. A simple tune would play in his mind, and he could almost see her fingers dancing over the keys. Sometimes he would hear imaginary laughter, soft and gentle, like she was in the next room, teasing him for getting something wrong. Those nights were the hardest. Sleep was broken, and when morning came, the emptiness was sharper. He started avoiding music entirely, unable to bear the reminders of her presence. Friends noticed he wasn't himself, but he couldn't explain. How could he explain that a melody could carry the weight of a missing person? Months turned into years. He built a life around her absence. He finished school, started working, and even tried to date, but no one compared to the memory of her. Every encounter felt incomplete, every laugh forced, every conversation lacking the depth he had shared with her. He kept certain places, sacred cafes, where they had sat, parks where they had walked, streets they had wandered together. Visiting them was like holding onto a photograph. The city was alive, but it had lost its color for him. Music, once a friend, had become a reminder of loss. A ghost that refused to leave. He would sometimes walk past the studio where they had met, the old wooden floors still visible through the glass windows. Sometimes he would peek inside, half expecting to see her sitting at the piano, fingers moving as if no time had passed. Of course, she was never there. But just the thought of it made his chest tighten, a mixture of hope and sorrow. It was an ache he carried quietly, never fully sharing, never fully escaping. The world moved on around him, but he remained suspended in a memory, a note held too long, vibrating in the air. Despite everything, he held on to small rituals they had created together. He would hum a tune she liked, even when he was alone. He would glance at street performers and imagine her playing beside him. He even kept a journal, writing down fragments of music in a desperate attempt to hold on to the connection they had shared. These rituals weren't just memories, they were lifelines. They reminded him that she had existed in his life, and that the bond they had formed had been real. One evening, after a particularly long day, he wandered into a small park where a street musician was playing. The notes were simple, a tune he didn't know, but it stirred something deep inside him. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of the emotion he had experienced when he was with her. He sat down on a nearby bench, letting the music wash over him. It wasn't her playing, but it was familiar in a way he couldn't describe. Something about it reached inside him, brushing against the memory of her laughter, the weight of her absence, and the unspoken promises they had shared. That evening, he left the park with a strange mixture of sadness and hope, a reminder that music could still touch him. Even in her absence, the seasons changed, and with them, his routines shifted. He learned to navigate the world with the weight of missing someone pressing gently but persistently on his heart. He realized that she had left a permanent mark, one that couldn't be erased by time, distance, or distraction. The ache was part of him now, inseparable from who he had become. And yet there was a strange beauty in it, a lesson that love and connection could leave lasting imprints. Even when the person who inspired them was gone, he didn't know where she had gone or why. He didn't know if he would ever see her again. But the memory of her, the sound of her music, the presence she had brought into his life continued to shape him in ways he hadn't anticipated. And though he told himself she was gone for good, deep down, he knew that some part of Hertha Part that had lived in the notes they had shared, in the moments of quiet connection, would always remain with him. Music had been their bond, and even in her absence, it whispered reminders of what had once been and what might somehow still be possible. Time moved forward, and he tried to move with it, though it felt like wading through water. Each day passed with a dull weight pressing on his chest. He got up, went to work, came home, and repeated the routine, but nothing felt real. Friends would talk about weekend plans or new adventures, and he would nod and smile, but inside he was somewhere else, lost in memories of her. The city seemed the same, people rushing, cars honking, lights flashing, but for him, it all existed in a dull gray. As if color had left the world the day she disappeared, he tried to distract himself with new hobbies. New books, new music, but nothing could fill the spaces she had left behind. The music he once loved became a reminder of what was gone. Songs they had shared, tunes she had hummed. Even random melodies that carried the echo of her laughter would strike him suddenly and make his chest tighten. He would close his eyes and imagine her sitting there, his fingers brushing over the keys, the way her eyes lit up when a note hit just right. These moments were both comforting and painful, and he never knew which feeling would come first. Sometimes he would walk along streets they had walked together, just to feel close to her. The cafes where they had spent hours talking now seemed like sacred places. He would sit at the same table, order the same drinks, and stare out the window, imagining her there across from him, smiling, gesturing, laughing at something only she found funny. Passers-by didn't notice the empty seat, didn't feel the absence, but he felt it acutely. The memory of her presence was so strong that it almost hurt more than the reality of her being gone. Nights were the hardest. He would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence that had become his companion. The city hummed softly outside his window, and sometimes he could swear he heard faint echoes of her music floating through the air. At first, he told himself it was imagination, a trick his mind played to give him comfort. But the feeling was real. It wasn't just sound. It was emotion, a pull he couldn't ignore. He remembered the way she had smiled when a note resonated just right, the way her eyes would glimmer when a melody captured what words could not. Those small details haunted him more than her absence ever could. He tried to immerse himself in work, pouring long hours into tasks that demanded focus but left little room for reflection. At first, it helped. Being busy was a shield against memories that threatened to drown him. But even work had its limits. A song playing in the office, the hum of a keyboard, the rhythm of footsteps in the hallway, everything became a trigger. He found himself distracted by the smallest things, by glimpses of someone's expression that reminded him of her. Productivity suffered, but more than that. His mind wandered into her absence and he felt helpless. Trapped in a world without her presence, he thought about reaching out, about sending messages, about finding her in the places they had once known. But fear held him back. What if she didn't want to be found? What if years had changed her and she no longer remembered him the way he remembered her? The uncertainty was crushing. He realized that part of what kept him going was not knowing. The hope, however faint, that someday, somehow, she might reappear, was what made life bearable. The day he gave up hope entirely, he knew, would be the day everything became gray, empty, and meaningless. One day, while walking home through an unfamiliar street, he heard a melody floating from a small, open cafe window. It was simple, unpolished, but the notes resonated deeply. He stopped, listening, heart pounding. The tune stirred something he had thought long buried, something fragile and alive. He couldn't explain it, but it felt familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere before, long ago. He stood there for what felt like hours, letting the music wash over him. For a moment, it was almost as if she were there, playing for him, reminding him that some part of their connection might still exist. He started seeking music again. Cautiously at first, afraid of the pain it might bring. He visited small cafes, local music shops, even street performers, listening for the echoes of what had once been. Sometimes it was a passing feeling, gone in an instant, leaving him hollow. Other times, a melody would strike just right, sending him spiraling into memories, into longing. It was a strange mix of comfort and torment, but it made him feel alive in ways he hadn't felt in years. He realized that the world hadn't stopped moving while he grieved. People laughed, loved, and lived, oblivious to his private sorrow. Slowly, he began to interact with life again, taking small steps, greeting neighbors, helping colleagues, even attempting casual conversation with strangers. It was awkward, uncomfortable, and sometimes exhausting, but it was a start. In these small interactions, he discovered something he hadn't expected. Life continued. Even when he felt stuck in his own memories. He was not alone, though he had felt like it for so long. Despite this, loneliness remained a constant companion. He would walk along familiar paths, imagining her beside him, sharing thoughts they no longer could. Every detail of her presence, her laugh, the tilt of her head when concentrating, the way she tapped her fingers absent-mindedly, was etched into his memory. It was a strange mix of pain and solace, knowing she had existed, knowing she had touched his life so deeply. And yet, the absence was a wound that never fully healed. Over time, he began writing again. Not music, not songs, but thoughts, reflections, and memories. He would sit at his desk late at night, jotting down fragments of the past, trying to make sense of what had happened. Writing became a quiet therapy, a way to preserve what had been, even if it could not return. He wrote about her laugh, about the way she had seen the world, about the music they had shared. It was not a diary for anyone else to read. It was a conversation with a part of himself that still lived in that lost connection. Sometimes he imagined what she might be doing. Was she happy? Did she think of him? Did she ever play the music they had loved, alone in some other place? These questions haunted him, but they also kept him tethered to the hope that she was out there, living a life shaped by the same experiences that had shaped him. Even if their paths never crossed again, he wanted to believe that the world had not erased her existence, that she still moved through it. With the same grace and passion he remembered, he began to notice little signs in everyday life that reminded him of her. A laugh in the distance, a note played badly on a piano. A street performer who hit a familiar tune. It was as if the world itself carried traces of her. Tiny echoes that reminded him she had once been real. Sometimes these moments would bring tears. Other times, a bittersweet smile. It was proof that the connection they had shared, though interrupted, was not entirely gone. It lingered like a quiet melody beneath the noise of the world. Waiting to be discovered again, friends began to see him change. Slowly, imperceptibly, he started engaging with life more fully. He laughed at jokes again, joined conversations, and even shared stories from his past, stories he had kept to himself for years. He discovered that while grief could be heavy, it did not have to define every moment. Life could still be meaningful, even with missing pieces. The memory of her remained a part of him, a guiding thread through the complex tapestry of existence in the quiet moments. However, he still returned to her absence. He would sit alone in his apartment, listening to the faint hum of the city outside, and imagine what it would be like if she suddenly appeared. Would she play the same music? Would she laugh the same way? Would the bond they had shared be instantly rekindled? Or would time have created an unbridgeable gap? These thoughts were both painful and comforting. A reminder that life was unpredictable, fragile, full of possibility. Music began to find him again, not as a reminder of loss, but as a bridge to hope. He started learning small pieces on his own, tentative at first, unsure if he could bear the emotions they would bring. Slowly, the act of creating sound became a quiet celebration of the past and a tentative step toward the future. Each note played was a conversation with memory, a recognition that while she might be gone from his immediate life, her influence, her presence, her music, still resonated within him. In time, he began to realize that the connection they had shared was not something that could be destroyed by absence or silence. It was a part of him now, woven into the fabric of his life. Even in her physical absence, the impact of her existence had shaped him, guiding his thoughts, influencing his choices, and coloring his emotions. He began to understand that love and connection were not bound by proximity, that memories could be living things, capable of inspiring, comforting, and challenging long after the person had left. As the months passed, he found himself looking forward to moments of music again, not with fear or sadness, but with curiosity and cautious optimism. The melodies that once haunted him now offered glimpses of possibility. Small reminders that life could still contain beauty, even in the shadow of loss. He didn't know if he would ever see her again, but he learned that life, like music, could continue with or without the presence of those we miss. He walked through the city with a new awareness, noticing the rhythms of life, the sounds of laughter, the cadence of footsteps. In the occasional note of music that seemed to speak directly to him, each sound carried a hint of hope, a suggestion that the world still had connections waiting to be discovered. And though she was absent, he carried her with him in every step, every note, every memory, learning that life could move forward without forgetting. That absence did not have to mean the end, and that music once shared could remain a bridge between hearts. Even across time and distance, months turned into years. But the memory of her continued to live in him, persistent and unrelenting. One afternoon, he was walking through a crowded street lined with shops and cafes, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets, thinking about how strange it was to feel so connected to someone who was no longer in his life. Then, from somewhere near a street corner, he heard it, a melody. Not just any melody, but one that stirred something deep within him, like a whisper from the past. It was faint at first, carried on the wind, almost drowned by the noise of traffic and chatter, but unmistakable. He stopped in his tracks, heart racing, recognizing the pattern immediately. It was the tune she had once played. A melody so simple, yet so powerful that it had embedded itself into his memory without him realizing it. He turned toward the sound, unsure if he was imagining it, if his mind was playing tricks on him. But no, the notes were real. They floated from a small, almost hidden cafe where a young woman sat at a piano visible through the window. She wasn't playing perfectly, but there was a familiarity in the way her hands moved over the keys, a rhythm he knew by heart. He stood there for several minutes, frozen, letting the music wash over him. Feeling emotions he thought he had buried resurface in waves. There was awe, disbelief, longing, and something else, hope, faint and fragile, but there. Over the following days, he found himself returning to the same street, lingering near the cafe, listening from a distance. The melody called to him like a lighthouse beacon through fog. It was as though someone, somewhere, was trying to reach him through music, carrying a message he couldn't yet understand. Each note seemed to resonate with memories of her laugh, her gestures, her presence, and the way music had always been the bridge between them. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was no coincidence. His heart told him she was trying to communicate. Even if the world insisted she was gone, he began paying closer attention to the music around him in places he never had before. Street performers, cafe musicians, even random songs playing in the distance started to feel meaningful, as if someone was speaking directly to him through the universal language of sound. He realized that the music he had avoided for years had never truly abandoned him. It had been waiting for the right moment, guiding him, reminding him of a connection that time and distance could not erase. Slowly, the act of listening became more than nostalgia, it became a mission. A search for understanding. He started keeping a notebook to jot down the melodies he heard, fragments of tunes that seemed familiar or carried emotional weight. Sometimes, he would hum them quietly to himself, trying to reconstruct them. Every note was a thread, a clue, a whisper from the past. And with each passing day, the sense that someone was trying to reach him grew stronger. He felt drawn toward the music, as though it were a map, and he was following its directions, step by step, towards something he couldn't yet see, but felt certain was waiting. One rainy evening, he decided to enter the cafe, driven by an impulse he didn't fully understand. The bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped inside, shaking off the droplets clinging to his coat. The space was small and warm, filled with the scent of coffee and pastries. The piano sat near the back, and when he approached, he saw the young woman playing, fingers brushing delicately over the keys. He froze, heart pounding, recognizing the same rhythm, the same melody that had haunted him for years. She looked up briefly, smiled faintly, and then returned to her playing, as if acknowledging him silently without words. The next few days became a pattern. He returned to the cafe regularly, always lingering in the background, listening, learning, and feeling the connection grow stronger. He never approached her directly, not yet, not until he understood what he was feeling, until he was ready to face the possibility that she might not recognize him. But the music had opened a door, and he felt the first stirrings of hope that he hadn't felt in years. It was fragile, like a candle in the wind, but it was there, illuminating a path through the darkness he had carried for so long. He began noticing small coincidences, moments that seemed too precise to be random. A song played on the street that mirrored a melody she had loved. A note dropped on the piano that matched one she had favored. Even the timing of his visits felt orchestrated, as if someone was guiding him to be present at the exact moment the music would reach him. It was exhilarating and frightening, a reminder that the universe, or perhaps fate, had a way of communicating when words were insufficient. The music became a bridge not only to her memory, but to the possibility that she might still be in his life. He found himself, talking quietly to her through the music, imagining what he would say if words were allowed. Each note he played on the old piano at home became a conversation, a dialogue with her presence, a way to keep the connection alive. Sometimes he would stop mid-tune, feeling overwhelmed by the weight of emotions relief, longing, fear, hope, and love, all mixed together in a single moment. It was a complexity he had never experienced before, a richness of feeling that only deep connection could bring, even when it existed across distance and silence. One afternoon, as he listened to her play, he noticed a change in her expression. There was a subtle intensity in her eyes, a focus that seemed to reach through the barriers of time and space. It was as if she, too, sensed the presence of someone from the past, someone who had never truly left. The realization sent shivers down his spine. He felt seen, understood, acknowledged, and it was more powerful than he had expected. The music was no longer just a memory. It was a living, breathing communication. Carrying meaning that words could not convey, he began experimenting with different melodies, combining fragments from his memory with new notes, trying to create a dialogue that could reach her across the divide. Each attempt was both thrilling and terrifying, for he had no idea how she would respond, if she would recognize him, or if the connection would shatter under the weight of time and expectation. But he persisted, driven by the certainty that the music held the key to understanding, to reconnecting, to finding the truth hidden in the notes. Days became weeks, and the pattern of music, listening, and reflection continued. He noticed small changes in himself. He laughed more freely. He engaged with the world more openly, and even began to form new friendships. The music, which had once been a reminder of loss, had become a lifeline, a source of inspiration and growth. He realized that connection, even when interrupted, could still guide him toward understanding, toward healing, toward the possibility of reunion. He started keeping a small recorder with him, capturing the melodies that seemed to appear at random moments throughout the city. Each recording was a piece of a puzzle, a fragment of communication that he could study and reflect upon. He began to see patterns emerge, connections between tunes, recurring themes, and emotional signatures that reminded him of her presence. It was both exhilarating and exhausting, a constant engagement with memory and hope that required all of his attention and emotional energy. Occasionally, he would encounter other people who seemed to recognize the melodies he was following. A passerby would nod, a musician would smile knowingly, or a barista would hum a note in response. These small acknowledgments felt like signs, subtle confirmations that he was on the right path, that the music was leading him somewhere significant. It was as if the world itself had become attuned to the resonance of the past, helping him navigate the complex terrain of memory. Longing and hope, he began to feel a shift within himself, a growing sense of confidence and purpose. The absence that had haunted him for so long no longer felt like a void, but like a space waiting to be filled with possibility. The music was teaching him patience, attentiveness, and the power of listening, not just with ears, but with the heart. Each note, each melody, was a lesson in connection, a reminder that even when people leave, their influence can remain, shaping life in subtle and profound ways. As the weeks continued, he felt an increasing urge to communicate through music more directly. He began writing small compositions, pieces that combined elements of the melodies he had recognized with his own creative interpretations. Each composition was a message, an offering, a way to reach across the gap that had separated them for so long. He practiced diligently, refining the notes, adjusting rhythms, and experimenting with harmonies, all the while imagining her response, wondering if she would hear, understand, and recognize the intent behind the music. One evening, after a long day of listening, composing, and reflecting, he returned to the cafe to hear her play once more. The street was quiet, the city lights casting gentle reflections on wet pavement. As he approached, the melody reached him immediately, stronger and clearer than ever before. He closed his eyes, letting the music envelop him, feeling the emotions it carried, familiar, profound, and alive. In that moment, he understood that the music was no longer just an echo of the past. It was a living bridge, a channel through which they could communicate, reconnect, and perhaps even heal the wounds that time had created. The realization brought tears to his eyes. It's not of sorrow, but of awe and gratitude. He had spent years in absence, longing and uncertainty, and yet here was proof that connection could endure. Music, the language they had shared, had remained constant, persistent, and true. It had never abandoned him, and now it was offering a path forward, a way to reach the presence he had feared lost forever. He knew that the journey was far from over, that challenges remained, and that the next steps required courage and patience. But for the first time in years, he felt a sense of certainty, a sense of possibility, a sense that the music and the person behind it had not given up on him either. He had begun to sense that the music was more than just melody, it was a message. Each note, each phrase, seemed to carry intention, a rhythm of thought that only someone deeply familiar with him could compose. He spent hours listening, replaying recordings he had made of street performers, local cafes, and the few times he had heard her play, piecing together fragments into something coherent. He was sure that she had never stopped thinking about him, even if the years and distance had kept her physically away. He had no proof, only intuition, and yet the feeling was overwhelming. Impossible to ignore, he began retracing old paths, visiting places where they had spent time together, imagining how she might have moved through the same streets, seen the same corners, touched the same worn benches. Each place held memories, subtle cues that he tried to read, as if the CI. Time itself was conspiring to guide him. It was a delicate dance of observation and memory, listening for echoes that could lead him closer. Even the faintest sign of reflection of light on the pavement, a smell carried by the wind, a note drifting from an open window, was enough to draw him onward, step by step. One afternoon, he noticed a small sheet of music lying on a bench outside a music school. The paper was worn and slightly damp from the rain, but the notes were legible, familiar. He picked it up carefully, feeling a rush of emotion. The handwriting was delicate, precise, unmistakably hers. The melody was one they had played together once, modified slightly, as though it had been waiting for him. He traced the lines with his finger, reading the notes like a letter, feeling the message embedded within. It was an invitation, a clue, a gentle nudge to continue following the music. Wherever it might lead over the next several days, he became consumed by this trail. Each morning he would wake early, notebook in hand, ready to document, reflect, and decode the patterns that seemed to appear wherever he went. He walked through familiar streets, listened to buskers, and lingered near small cafes and music shops, carefully noting anything that resonated with the melodies he knew. Every fragment mattered, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. He began to notice the way certain notes would repeat, the way rhythms echoed moments from their shared past, the subtle cues that seemed like a conversation directed solely at him. The intensity of his focus left little room for ordinary distractions. Friends and coworkers noticed a change in him. He was quieter, more introspective, yet somehow more present, more alive. He carried himself differently, moved through the world with a sense of purpose, and yet remained cautious, afraid of misinterpreting the signs. He didn't want to chase illusions. He couldn't ignore the possibility that the music was guiding him toward something real, something profoundly important. The more he listened, the more convinced he became that she had never truly left him, that the bond they shared had endured despite time and distance. One rainy evening, he followed a faint melody to a small rehearsal hall tucked between two buildings. The door was slightly ajar, and through it he could see her seated at a piano. Her fingers moved gracefully over the keys, shaping the music with care and emotion. The moment he stepped closer, she paused, sensing his presence, and their eyes met across the room. There was recognition, a quiet understanding that needed no words. The music had done what years of absence could not. It had reconnected them, slowly, gently, in a way that words alone never could. He stayed at the edge of the room, listening, letting the music speak first. Each note she played carried meaning, expressing emotion she had never articulated, revealing truths about her absence, her fears, and her longing. He felt the depth of her struggle, the reasons she had been away, the moments she had thought of him, and the choices she had made to protect herself, and perhaps even him. The melody was her story, and as he absorbed it, he understood more than he ever could have from spoken language. Every pause, every crescendo, every delicate touch on the keys told a story of love, regret, hope, and endurance. He finally approached her after she finished playing, and they stood in silence for a long moment, the air thick with unspoken words. She looked at him, eyes shining with emotion, and he realized that she had been as haunted by their separation as he had. They didn't need to speak immediately. The music had conveyed everything: the pain, the longing, the hope, and the desire to reconnect. Words would follow, but the music had bridged the gap first, preparing them for the conversation that was inevitable but no less significant. Over the next few weeks, they began meeting regularly, using music as their language. They shared pieces, created melodies together, and discovered that the connection they had once shared was not only alive, but stronger than before. The years of absence had added layers to their understanding, depth of emotion and experience that enriched their interactions. They laughed, they cried, and they listened. Each note a reaffirmation of the bond that had never truly been broken. Through these meetings, he began to uncover the truths that had been hidden in the years of separation. She explained why she had left, the fears and circumstances that had kept her away. In the moments she had thought of him, wishing she could reach out but unable to, he listened with patience and empathy, understanding that the absence had not been born of indifference, but of necessity, and that the love they shared had endured in ways that defied time and distance. The music had been their silent dialogue, their way of maintaining connection when words were impossible. They also discovered that the music carried messages that went beyond what either could have anticipated. A simple tune played on the piano might contain an expression of forgiveness, an acknowledgement of pain, or a declaration of love. Each composition became a dialogue, a negotiation of emotions, a testament to their enduring bond. They learned to listen not just with their ears, but with their hearts, interpreting nuances in rhythm, phrasing, and tone that conveyed meaning as clearly as spoken language ever could. The music became a map, guiding them through the complexities of their relationship and the lingering effects of their separation. Outside the music, they began to rebuild trust and connection in everyday life. They shared meals, walked through familiar streets, and revisited old haunts, but always with an awareness of the importance of the music that had brought them back together. Each ordinary interaction was enriched by the understanding that had been cultivated through sound, the patience, attentiveness, the empathy that had been forged in silence and reinforced through melody. They found joy in small moments, comfort in shared routines, and excitement in the discovery that connection could be renewed even after long absence. As their relationship grew, they both reflected on the lessons of the years apart. He realized that absence, while painful, had allowed him to understand the depth of his feelings and the resilience of his heart. She recognized that the love they shared was stronger than fear, that communication could transcend words, and that patience and persistence could nurture bonds even when circumstances seemed insurmountable. Together, they acknowledged that life was unpredictable, but that love, when genuine, had the power to endure, adapt, and flourish. They also came to appreciate the subtle ways in which music had guided them. Every melody, every rhythm, every note carried intention and emotion. Learning to read these cues had strengthened their understanding of each other. The act of listening, truly listening, became a cornerstone of their renewed relationship. It was a skill they had honed in isolation through longing and reflection, and it allowed them to connect on a level that was profound, nuanced, and deeply human. The music had taught them patience, empathy, and the art of expression, lessons that extended far beyond the piano. Together, they began to create new compositions, blending memories of the past with the experiences of the years apart. Each piece was a testament to their journey, a chronicle of endurance, hope, and rediscovered connection. They shared these compositions with close friends and family, not as performances, but as expressions of emotion, storytelling through sound and celebration of the bond that had survived time and distance. The music became a living record of their relationship, a tangible reminder that connection could thrive even under the most challenging circumstances as they continued to play together. He felt a profound sense of completion. The absence that had haunted him for so long was no longer a void, but a bridge, a journey that had led them back to each other. The music, which had once been a source of pain and longing, had become a vehicle for healing, understanding, and joy. Every note played together reaffirmed the bond that had been tested by time, distance, and circumstance, proving that love and connection could endure, evolve, and ultimately triumph. The city, once gray and lifeless in his perception, now seemed vibrant and full of possibility. Streets he had walked countless times felt alive with echoes of the music they had shared, carrying reminders of their journey and the resilience of their bond. Every encounter, every sound, every moment was imbued with meaning, a reflection of the connection that had guided them back to each other. He realized that the world, despite its unpredictability, could hold beauty in that love when nurtured and respected, could transcend the limitations imposed by time and circumstance. Through their renewed connection, they discovered a deeper appreciation for life and each other. The music had not only reunited them, but had also taught them to value communication, patience, and empathy in ways that extended far beyond the piano. They approached challenges with a sense of collaboration and understanding, drawing strength from the lessons learned during their years apart. The bond that had been tested by absence was now fortified by experience, resilience, and the enduring power of shared passion. In this way, they began to rebuild a life together, anchored by music, but enriched by the depth of understanding that had developed over time. Each day brought new